Zion, towards the bottom of the page, the line begins um, line 24. And after we were explaining about how this is different levels of Isis, Isis Achika, Isis Aksiva, written letters versus letters that are engraved. And then we were talking about two levels of engraving. There's an engraving that's only a surface engraving. Then there's an engraving that is through and through. So now, and that is the idea of Zois Chukas HaTorah, that from the level of the Torah, the way it's completely engraved, that comes down here below to our Torah down here. And so he's not, once he explained what is the physical idea of engraving, what's the idea of engraving that is through and through, and engraving it's on the surface. So now he's going to explain where and how that reflects in the spiritual worlds, Lamaila. Okay, Mavur Sham, line 24, page Zion, towards the bottom of the page. Mavur Sham, like explained over there in the Chutitayram, I'm sorry, in the Hemshech of Tafri Samach Vav, Protein Yam Lamaila, the specific matters of these Mishalim of Chakika, of engraved the way it is in the worlds above. Shekel Datsilis Him Kimshal Oisaksiv. And the vessels of Atzilus are similar to letters of writing. Though when we talk about something that's written, we say once it's written, the letters and the parchment are one. The same thing, the Kalim of Atzilus and Alakus are not Chas v'Sholem, two foreign and separate things. Why are they not two separate things, Chas v'Sholem, Yosim Alakus? Because even the Kalim of Atzilus are godliness. That's what we always speak about, the difference between Atzilus and B'ri Yitzir Asiyah. That in Atzilus, it's Iyu v'chayoyichad v'iyu v'garmoyichad b'hoim. That both the Oidus and the Kalim are one with Eibishter. Both are Alakus, both the Oidus and the Kalim. So therefore, it's like letters that are written that are joined with the parchment. We call Malcolm still in all. Top of the next page, top of page Ches. Still in all, the Kalim are something distinct and separate from the Oir, and they are like paper and ink, or parchment and ink, that are essentially two separate things. Then we go to the spheres the way they are on a higher level. The S spheres, the Keser, the Adam Kadban, and the 10 spheres, the way that's in the level of Keser immediately above Atzilus, or the level of Ak, which is like a Keser closely on the whole Seder Ishtalshlus. So there's 10 spheres the way they are there as well. And Kimshal Ha'Isis Achikam She'enan Mahus Acheres Mulvad Even Toiv. They are like engraved letters that are not a separate entity other than the precious stone in which it was engraved in. Just like when we have an Evan Toiva, so we have over there the engraved letters are Minei Ubei, they are from the Evan Toiv, and they are in the Evan Toiv. There's a mimer, actually, I was learning a different mimer from Tavshim Ches. He explains over there the two expressions, Minei Ubei, we had earlier in the mimer, maybe we'll mention it later. Aval Afal became Yeshla Oisius Mekoim Achiza. Still in all, the letters that are engraved, that are only surfaced engraved, so there's room for it to be grasped. The Efsher Lamaloisam Bidyoy, and they allow themselves for being able to be concealed. It's possible to fill these letters with these engraved letters with ink. I knew this means Shabbat Ba'adim Kadman Yesh Metzias Akalim and Keser, and in Ak, there is already an existence of Kalim, Ba'adshim Chinas Makir Kalim Ba'atzilus, until they are a source for the vessels of Atzilus. Just like when we speak about that, the fact that there's engraved letters in surface engraving, in let's say a precious stone, even though they don't actually conceal the precious stone like the like ink letters would conceal the parchment underneath it, yet they allow for and they are enabling that a person could fill those letters with ink. They could be blocking the precious stone. In a similar vein, even though the kalim, the way they are in Keser, the kalim of the Esespheres, the way they are in Ak, do not at all conceal the oir of Ak or the oir of Keser, but they are already enabling for, and they are already something that is a source for the eventual concealment that will be when we reach the Kalim of Atzilus. The Indian Hakikim Ever, then there's a higher level, the level of engraving that goes through and through. So that Hu Indian Golif Gilifu Betihiru Ilah, but there's a lashon in Kabbalah. Golif Glifu means engraved. He has engraved in the supernal brilliance or purity. What is that level of Tehiru Ilah? Tehiru Ilah, that brilliance of above that's going on the Oiris of Shlifnat Tzimtzum. And the way the spheres are in the Tehiru Ilah, they are engraved, but not the engraving of a surface engraving, like the spheres are in Keser or in Ak, but they are engraving, they are considered an engraving that's through and through. He says in line 10, Shisham L'Shaych Inyan HaMetzias Klal. Over there in the Oiris of Shalifnei Tzimtzum, the way the Esespheres are there, the way the Kalim are there isn't at all even a possibility for the existence of vessels, not even that type of very fine and refined existence like the vessels are in Keser or in Ak. That's just like when you have letters that are engraved through and through, that there's nothing to be grasped, there's nothing that can be held on to, and letters that are engraved through and through cannot be filled with ink. The same thing, the kalim that are in, or the 10 spheres, the way they are in the Oirin Sof, they do not have to, they have no mitzias. They're not even a source for the worlds, just like you cannot even fill up the through and through engraved letters with ink. So now the Rebbe is going to introduce something after bringing something from Samach Vav. He's going to push it up a notch, and he's going to go to Ayin Beis now. And this is going to be a little bit more edel. So let's halten cup, like we say in Yiddish. Let's keep track of what's going on. The Rebbe is going to explain a deeper concept in this concept of engraved letters, using the example of making of letters in a seal that causes letters to be engraved or embossed somewhere else. Now, when you have letters cut out in a seal, and then you press that seal into wax, so you have the identical type of letters that it was engraved in the seal are now appearing in the wax. And yet, the Ayin Beis that we're going to quote now is going to say there is a difference in quality, in level of unity of the engraved letters in the seal, let's say a signet ring seal, versus the engraving that now takes place in the wax once I use that seal or signet ring to engrave letters now in the wax. Let's see how he explains those two levels. Line 12 on page Ches. Yesh lahoisif lahoyer, we could add them to note. Gam mavor be'emshech tafresh Ayin Beis, also what's explained in the hemshech of Ayin Beis, be'inyan oisach kikem, concerning the letters of engraving. And he doesn't go into this concept of through and through, etc. He's talking it from a little bit of a different perspective. So he says, for example, like letters that are engraved in a seal, in a signet ring, for example. Though when we talk about these letters, They are only a form that is there in the seal. There's the seal itself would be shapeless, would be unformed. A person engraves letters in that seal. So now when we engrave letters in that seal, so now we have given a form to the seal. Despite the fact that we've given it form, so usually when we talk about form is already something that is a limitation or a lowering from the purity and an unformed essence. Despite that, it's called surah atzmis, meaning what is the surah of the essence? The form that we're engraving in the seal is in the very material of the seal itself. It's not like a ray of the sun that comes out of the sun. It's not like it's something that results from the seal. In the actual body of the seal, we have over there the form of these letters that are engraved over there. They are different than the letters in wax that are now engraved or embossed or debossed from the letters that are in the seal. Though the form and the picture that these letters now have in the wax, once he sealed it with his seal, is identical to the shape and form of the letters the way they are in the seal. The letters in the wax are not considered the essential form. It's a result of the form of the seal. It's not the essential form of the seal. It's a form that was engraved from a different form. It's a resulting form from the original form. It is separated from the form of that's in the seal itself. And then in Ayin Beis he goes on further to explain. And then Ayin Beis he goes on to explain and add about the essential form. That when you're dealing with the essential form, as in the case of the form in the seal itself, that then the form is in the essence of the seal. Additionally, that it's not just that it's the location is in the seal, but that the seal itself, the essence of the seal itself, top page test, takes on the form of this seal. Takes on the form of these letters. That the form is the essence itself that is formed with this form. In other words, it's as if you cannot distinguish between the essence and the form that you have now in the seal itself. When you're talking about the form that has been carved out in the seal itself to make these particular letters and shapes in the seal itself, so it's not something additional to the essence. It's not, there is the essence of the seal and there's the form that is in the seal. It's not even considered like a revelation of the essence. Rather, it's the essence of the seal itself. That is the form. That is what's taking shape. And over there in Ayin Beis he concludes, all of this entire idea, the idea of the form that's in the essence of the seal, that you cannot say in Atzilus. That is only applicable in levels higher than Atzilus. In other words, the Isach Kikah, like we said before in the Maimer, is only applicable higher than Atzilus, and Atzilus is the level of letters of writing. From this is also understood the great advantage and the great quality of Chukas HaTorah. He's giving a new understanding of the phrase Chukah of the Torah, meaning there is the state of Torah the way it's Chakika. We're talking about the Torah the way it's in its root and its source. In other words, not the Torah the way it's not Silus. Torah the way it's not Silus is a level of the letters of writing. How much more so Torah the way it's in our world? That's what we know the Torah from. We know it from the written Torah. We know it from the oral Torah, which is even lower. But rather, Zois Chukas HaTorah is talking about the level of Torah, the way it's all the way higher than Atzilus, even an Oiris of Tzimtzum, the way it's a level of Chakika engraved. Until that it includes the expression Zois Chukas HaTorah is referring to the Torah, the way it's the most highest level, that it's through and through, the level of the infinite light of Hashem that is prior to the Tzimtzum. It's all the way that level is the level of Torah that we are referring to, Zois Chukas HaTorah. Okay, any questions before we go on? Now we're going to go into more simpler ideas.
I have a question.
Yes.
In this mashal, it's irrelevant whether it's embossed or debossed, right?
Right, he doesn't get into that. There isn't something else about Film Yad, Film Shoroy, she talks about it. But no, in this mashal, embossed and debossed, whether it's protruding letters, whether it's letters that are on the bottom, that doesn't make a difference. Okay, let's continue. Further on page test, Ois Gim. So now the Rebbe, of course, wants to know and always brings out, so what does this mean by me? What is it by me in my world, this idea of Oisis Achkik? We can add and explain the idea of written letters versus engraved letters in the avoida, in the soul of a person. Therefore, we'll, based on explaining how it is in the person's soul, we will also be able to understand the association, the connection of letters of engraving. That we said the word chukah talks to us about the idea of being engraved. The idea of chukim, super rational laws, in the simple sense that we left off yesterday, the end of Voice Aleph, I think it was, with the question that the Rebbe asked, seemingly, how do we fit together two explanations? On the one hand, if you're telling me that chukah is talking about super rational mitzvahs, so that's a very specific type of mitzvahs, and not only that, para aduma is of the super rational mitzvahs, of the chukim, something totally unique. And on the other hand, you're telling me that the entire Torah is this level of chakika and so on. So how do we connect them? So the Rebbe is going to connect them based on understanding what it is in the person's nefesh. The idea behind this is the intellect was in what a person who can see what it's like letters of writing. Written letters are something additional to the parchment, like we said before. So he says, why is the idea of a person's intellect and his mind something additional, similar to letters that are additional and added to parchment? The idea of a person's intellect is something additional to the actual essence of the person. Like it's obvious in the fact that in the idea of intellect, there are changes and differences from small to higher. That when a person is on the mind, it develops, it matures. He's younger, his intellect is on a lower level. He's older, he more matures, he develops his intellect. A child, his intellect is very small. And as he grows, his intellect grows as well. Also amongst people themselves, not just we see changes within the person himself, but we see changes and differences between people. Some people are more intellectual, some people are less intellectual. So therefore, that is a proof that intellect is not who the person is. Top of page Yud, that idea of intellect is something additional to the essence of the person. And Alter Rebbe explains this in Hukot Torah and the famous Maimer, the beer L'Sashbez Melach. The essence of the person's soul is the essence of his life. We don't say that a person is less alive when they're younger because their intellect is less, and they're more alive when they're older, when the intellect is more. Or a person that's more intellectual is more alive than a person that's less intellectual. No, because intellect is something additional to the nefesh. It's something additional to the person themselves. So it's like the intellect in relationship to the person's essence, to the person's nefesh, is like letters of writing in regards to the parchment that it's written on. Top of page Yud, line 1, ilu oisachik, as opposed to engraved letters, inyan etzman neshama, that is referring to the essence of the person's neshama. That it's incomparably higher than the idea of intellect. And the Rebbe is going to bring an example that the essence of the neshama, to be able to understand how the essence of the neshama is higher than intellect, that will be similar to the way we say Hashem's essence is higher than seichel. Like for example, Hashem's essence, like to explain in Tanya. He's exalted and high and very much greater, with unbelievable greatness from the level of Chachma. It's impossible to relate to the Eibishter anything that has to do with Chachma. To such a degree is Hashem beyond being even related to the idea of Chachma. Even in a way of talking about with a great description and quality about how great the Eibishter is. For example, you cannot say Loimar Allah to say about the Eibishter even to say that it's impossible for any type of creature in existence of the highest most worlds or the lowest most levels to be able to comprehend his intellect or to comprehend who he is. So the Rebbe says, no, you can't even use that description, what's called sometimes Hasagas Hashlila or Yedias Hashlila, but a negative way of understanding him. And someone that says about Hashem's essence that it's impossible to grasp him. It's like saying about some very deep and awesome and exalted idea that, you know what, this idea is so deep, we can't even touch it. It's ridiculous. Whoever hears such a thing will laugh. That's how you determine the depth of an idea, that you can't touch it. So just like we say that concept concerning Hashem's essence, that Hashem's essence is so far removed from Chachma that you cannot even say that it's impossible to grasp him with Chachma. So too by us, when we talk about the Etzem HaNeshama, it's the whole idea of Chachma doesn't apply over here. So too the Neshama is incomparably higher from the idea of intellect. Only afterwards the neshama becomes enclosed in intellect, until it's called a thinking soul. So we do find in Tanya and in other places of Siddur the term nefesh hamaskelos, a thinking soul. but that's not an innate, inherent, essential description of the nefesh. The nefesh itself is beyond the idea of askala, beyond being called nefesh hamaskelas, a thinking soul. But once the neshama becomes enclosed in seichel, so then it's called nefesh hamaskelas. So now, going back to avodah, we want to know, what does this mean in avodah nefesh ha'adam? He says in line 15, from this is understood also in the service of a person. The idea of letters that are engraved is that every single Jewish person wants by his nature to fulfill the will of the Eibishter. This nature comes from the essence of the soul that's beyond intellect. And this will that a person wants to fulfill Hashem's the commands and will without any type of intellectual reason for it. It's a part of the neshama that's beyond intellect. Where does it express itself? When we're doing a mitzvah that does not have any rational explanation to it. Keep mitzvahs, the edus and mishpatim, when we're dealing with mitzvahs that are either testimonial mitzvahs, they testify and celebrate a certain event that occurred, or we're talking about civil laws, since there's some intellectual reason for it, even though the person can be doing it solely because of his connection to the Eibishter and his essential bond with Hashem, but since they do have a reason for it, and since they could be understood intellectually, so it doesn't allow for the expression of that essential bond of the neshama with the Eibishter. Since the additional intellect, we say that the intellect is an internal soul power. It's not a makifdika thing. And therefore, since it's not transcendent, it becomes identified with the person, like the ink becomes one with the parchment. The neshama encloses itself in the intellect. So once he performs a mitzvah that does have intellectual reasoning, that is understood rationally, this at least somewhat conceals and covers over the essential will, the will that comes from the core of the neshama of the yid that transcends intellect, that has this essential will to bond with Hashem. And only the mitzvahs that are super rational mitzvahs, that they have no combination of intellect or reason to them, over there becomes revealed the essence of the soul. According to this, we can connect the idea of those laws that are super rational laws with engraved letters. The advantage of super rational laws over the edus type of laws and mishpatim type of laws. It's similar to that advantage of engraved letters over written letters. That engraved letters, like we said before, is not something additional to the precious stone upon which it's engraved. And therefore, it does not conceal the brilliance or doesn't conceal the stone itself, whereas the ink on paper or parchment conceals that part of the parchment or paper that's written on. Even more specifically, we spoke earlier about two types of engraving. Concerning the two types of engraving, a normal engraving and an engraving that's through and through. That the general type of level of chukim, the general whole category of super rational mitzvahs, does have some type of way how intellect can appreciate them or realize that there are things beyond intellect. So therefore, since it does have some type of achiza, some type of grasp, just like the engraved letters that's on the surface does allow for it eventually to be filled with ink and become darkened and so on. So it somewhat also can cover over on the essential will. It doesn't become revealed so much the essence of the soul. Similar to the letters that are engraved in a precious stone, that those letters at least somewhat take away from the brilliance, at least where the area of the stone, where it's engraved in that stone, takes away from the brilliance of the precious stone. It doesn't sparkle so much in the place, in the precious stone where the letters are engraved. As opposed to paraduma, the ultimate chika of the Torah, the ultimate super rational law of the Torah. It's totally super rational. It completely makes no sense. This is similar to the letters that are engraved through and through. They have no place to be grasped whatsoever. And they do not conceal whatsoever. There's no room for darkness, and there's no room for anything to be covered over, or even a source for ink to be placed over there, etc. Any questions?